Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of Hell If We Know. I'm Jonathan. My co-host Chris is not here with me right now because this is just an introduction, and that's just a one-person kind of job. However, we are both just pleased as peaches that you're here doing this right now, listening to our podcast. We appreciate that support, and we think it's cool that anyone would listen to this. So we thank you. It is our first episode, so as you can imagine, we're still figuring out a lot of things. For instance, Chris and I both reference things throughout the recording, but the things we're referencing happened before the recording, and we're referencing them as if you should know what we're talking about, which is unrealistic and unfair. I say skepticist on accident instead of skeptic, and I misuse some other words throughout it. I call Elisha a major prophet, which is just wrong, as we all know, and that's just humiliating. But you know what? We have some classic good times along the way. In this episode, you get to hear Chris share some of his unique opinions about unicorns and bald people. Separate issues, but both of them unique and interesting in my opinion. At least one point, I get kind of hung up on my evil liberal agenda because that's something I frequently do. And ultimately, we completely fail to make any real sense of one of the more absurd stories in the Christian Bible. So, obviously, we're off to a strong start, but even if you don't like this episode, stick around. It's gonna change because we don't know what we're doing yet. We're just happy to be doing it, and we're happy you're here with us. If you do happen to have any young children or otherwise impressionable listeners with you at the moment, do not worry, because we did censor all and any profanity with burp noises. Enjoy the show. So remember when you were going to tell me a Bible story?
Yes. I was going to tell you a story of the Bible. Let me take you to a land.
Should we talk about the podcast at all first? Should we be like, hey, there's a podcast? Or should we just be like, hey, they'll catch up?
I mean, they will catch up, but maybe we should give it a slight intro. So this is a podcast that Jonathan and I are going to do together, wherein we talk about the Bible and religion and themes and ideas that go along with those two topics. But it's not going to be boring because we're going to make it funny and exciting, and we're going to talk about how that stuff applies to people's lives and modern society and all that sort of thing. And it's going to be fun. And it's going to be just two boys talking to each other.
Two brothers. Just kidding. That's kind of copyrighted. That's some...
Is Two Brothers copyrighted? What is that?
No, that's from that one episode of Rick and Morty. Remember when
I'm
they have
rewatching
that
that
interdimensional cable and they hit improvised all these
that
TV
whole
shows
episode.
Like, just two brothers. I just stole that joke from them is what I did.
That's right. I remember that. I'm rewatching all of Rick and Morty right now because it's on Korean Netflix.
Oh,
so
nice.
every night I'll just put on a couple episodes and watch it. I just watched last night I watched the Show Me What You Got episode.
Yeah. Oh man, there's not a bad episode of that show. That's a fantastic show. That's gonna be my first official plug of this podcast, Rick and Morty. In case you're one of the 10 people who might listen to the 10 people total will listen to this podcast. I mean, in case you're one of the 1/10 of a person who's listening to this podcast and doesn't already watch Rick and Morty, I highly recommend Rick and Morty. Official plug.
I also recommend Rick and Morty, but I think that there's nobody who's listening to this who hasn't heard of or seen Rick and Morty. So I don't think we're doing them any favors. Although we should ask for a sponsorship. I'll go ahead and write that down in my notes.
Right, Rick and Morty. They need that advertising, you know.
They do,
because there's a lot of people who have heard of Jonathan and Chris but haven't heard of Rick and Morty. So
right.
They're
if you like our comedy, you'd like theirs.
Because it's basically the same thing, right? We don't even know what this is yet.
Yeah, I know. The first time I watched Rick and Morty, I didn't like it, and I didn't really get the hype. And it took a long time and a lot. It took a lot for me to I don't know. I guess I always got it, but I didn't I understood why it was so meta and cool, but a lot of it just felt lazy to me. But then I started listening to Dan Harmon's podcast, Harmontown, where he does like this, and Dan Harmon is one of the creators of Rick and Morty, and his podcast is just the same thing as Rick and Morty, but it's just like him and a couple of his friends just like do improv for 2 hours, and it's really, really funny. And so that made me appreciate Rick and Morty a lot more. And now that I'm watching it a second time, or maybe even like a third time all the way through, I really, really like it.
Yeah. I liked it the first time I watched it because I'm a smart viewer of media. So that's cool for you that you put in the effort to like it, but I'm just going to throw out there that I liked it immediately. Whatever, though. It's cool.
I was really convinced that it was like an Emperor's New Clothes situation at first, where like a bunch of people at first were like, "Oh, this show's really good. Like, it like everybody needs to watch it. Isn't it just so good?" And then like everybody starts watching it and agreeing with each other just because people like agreeing with each other. Like, yeah, it's really good. I really like it. And I felt like I was the only one to be like, "This show's nobody's talking about how it's not actually good."
Yeah, and I feel like that's actually something that's very characteristic of you. So, like, part of me feels like we're wasting this part of the podcast because we're not actually getting to the meat of the issue. But this is good introduction, honestly, to, like, get to know the characters present in our podcast. Chris is someone, in my opinion, you may refute this, and if you refute this, I'm willing to concede. But you're someone who will very quickly jump to the Emperor's New Clothes thing, where you're like, I don't like something just because everyone else likes it. And that's a good thing, because you'll question everything immediately. Like, you won't just like something because everyone else likes it. But I think sometimes you might overstep it. And this is coming from someone who also does the same thing. Like, I think one of the things that we bond over most commonly is when we're like, why the hell does everyone like this thing? This is a stupid thing to like. But like
BuzzFeed.
Like BuzzFeed, or... should we even say it yet? I think you know the example I'm thinking of. Should we say it in our first episode and immediately alienate every potential listener?
Is it mermaids?
I'm gonna say
because I think mermaids are bullshit.
I don't want to admit what the real thing is. I'll text it to you.
I don't like how they're portrayed in any fashion in any of their media portrayals. In Harry Potter, they're like these monstrous sirens who like lure people to the depths and then try to eat them with their fangs.
That's gross.
In the show that I watched once on Nickelodeon when I was like 11, they were beautiful hot girls. Oh, text from Jonathan. No, we definitely shouldn't say this, but you're right. We both hate this thing.
Yeah,
I don't say hate, but we don't see the hype.
Exactly.
I wanted to I wanted to make clear here. There's a lot of things that I dislike, not because other people like them, but
you're just ready not to like them. Like, you approach them with like a...
I think I approach everything with objectivity.
Yes.
And I'm ready to be entirely convinced that something is good if it's good, but I also have a skeptical side of my brain in everything that I go into. And so I think I was just hesitant to adopt Rick and Morty. It's the same kind of thing how I feel about Inception. Everybody liked the movie Inception. Everybody thought it was the greatest thing to the cinematic world to ever touch the theaters. And I just think it's... And nobody actually understands that movie. Nobody actually knows what the hell happened.
Spoken like a true person who just didn't get it.
Yeah, and see, there you go. You're part of the system, man. You're just a cog in the machine, man. Everybody, you're just a sheeple, man. Everybody watched that movie and said, "Oh, it was so cool. It was so... did you understand what happened? Like, yeah, man, the ending is like so crazy." Nobody understands what happened in that movie. I don't understand what happened in that movie, and I'm the smartest person alive.
I think we should form a separate podcast where we discuss whether or not Inception is good. Because I think we could talk about that for a long time. Because I'm team Inception is good. But here's what I'll take away from that introduction is like Chris is the like intelligent skepticist of this podcast. He's the one that will like approach anything with a very healthy degree of skepticism. And I think especially when we're talking about matters of religion, which we will do in this podcast heftily, that's kind of the whole deal. I think that's incredibly important. So that's honestly the whole podcast was Chris's idea, and I think it was born of a place of skepticism, and I love that. So that's the moral of the story from what we've discussed about that, I think. What do you say?
Good way to bring it back into the main theme of the podcast here.
Thank you, I'm trying.
Which is talking about, stuff, and hell if we know.
Exactly, hell if we know. So now that we've said it, I guess that's officially the name.
Yeah, we can't really change it now, can we?
I guess we could. Maybe we could just make that the title of the first episode, but Now I've made it too obvious. I guess we have to make that the name.
Don't talk about this kind of thing into a microphone.
Right, we can edit this out.
Breaking the fourth wall, man.
Well, we're on a podcast. Whoa!
Inception.
No, I swear, we should actually make a separate podcast where we discuss whether or not Inception is good.
I will admit, I haven't watched it since it came out in like 2010 or whatever. And maybe 16-year-old Chris was, or 17-year-old Chris was just, his brain was not developed enough to understand it. But I sort of like being on team, you don't know what happens, and you're just pretending to because everybody else does.
I get that. And that's your healthy skepticism, I think.
Yeah, but it's also just blind ignorance and rage because I haven't watched the movie in 5 years.
Yeah. Well, honestly, if we start to make this podcast, the other one I'm talking about, the Inception one, if you rewatch it and you're like, oh, I get it, that'll be incredibly disappointing to me. Because I'm looking at this economically, and I'm like, oh, here's a very lucrative podcast we could make. Obviously, I'm all about the money. So I'm thinking like Squarespace, Blue Apron, they're going to be all over us pretty soon. So
For
if
sure.
we have
Let me
two
tell you a little bit
podcasts-
about Squarespace. Squarespace.
Wait, hold out for the
Squeam
money, man.
Spooks.
Hold out for the bucks.
Squeam Spooce is a little bit of a podcast where people can get. Well, it's actually a website, not a podcast, and it's where people can make a website, and they can make a beautiful website with easy to use design tools and other things that are I don't know. I always skip the ads in podcasts now because I've heard it all a million times, so I don't actually know what they say anymore.
Yeah, no, it depends on the podcast. Some of them are really good at advertising, and I hope that someday when we get advertisers, we'll be good at it. We'll be the type of
I think
podcast where I won't want to skip the advertisements.
That's true. That a podcast is doing a good job of like just being generally entertaining when you don't even want to skip the advertisements.
Exactly.
Because there's some where they literally just like read off what the sponsor wants them to say.
Yeah, they've got like the
And,
list of phrases.
Yeah, the list of phrases, and it's kind of like the same exact phrasing every week or month or whatever, how frequent the podcast is. But then there's some where it's like it's their personality and they're just talking about a product or a service, and I think those are fun to listen to.
Yeah, exactly. So let's get back to the subject. I feel like we've rambled a lot. So you are Chris. You are a healthy skeptic. We are hell if we know. When our powers are combined, we are hell if we know. And we're gonna talk about religion and everything that Chris mentioned. Just trying to look at it through a modern perspective and putting it in a way. Because here's my contribution. Is what I feel like we really need to address. Is I feel like there's a lot of the world that looks at religion through the perspective of how we looked at our religions 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 2,000 years ago, however long ago it was. And that's because that's how it's been presented to them. And if you want to just look at, there's all sorts of sources if you want to look at religion in all kinds of new ways. But specifically what
You heard it here first, guys. There's sources on religion.
Right.
Try the Bible.
Yeah, no, don't even try the Bible. Listen to us first. That's what I'm going to say.
You heard it here first, guys. Don't try the Bible. Bible. Not even once.
Yeah, so obviously we're ready to take on some advertisers. That's the message I took from that. But
I hope we get sponsored by the Bible.
Yeah, do they have like a representative that's like contacting people?
I'll email a guy.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. But yeah, so like I want us to be, and here's the thing, part of the hell if we know like whole like persona is that we are just two guys. We don't know what we're talking about, to a degree. But I want this to be something where we like discuss religion because I'm a Christian and I studied Christian education, and I want this to be an outlet where we can look at religion and specifically Christianity just because that's the context I come from, where we can look at that in a modern perspective and understand it in the new world, like the world that we live in today, and with everything that we know, and not just try to look at the fundamentalist that holds us back and that makes Christianity look bad. It's not just, I don't want this to just be an image update where we're like, yeah, Christianity can be cool, kids. Like, look at all the teens on skateboards who are Christians. I want this to be like
Free
an
pizza
actual...
at Reverend Tim Tom's house.
Right. I want this to be an actual outlet where we can discuss religion and all of its implications, good and bad, and all the different ways people understand it in their own personal lives in the world that we live in today. And so that's kind of like the most vague way I can put it, I guess, of how I want this podcast to go. And I think Chris agrees. We're like, that's like, if we can actually like present things in a cool way that like challenges the global understanding of religion, that's kind of my whole deal. I'm into that. So
that's your cuppa right there.
That's my cuppa. Yeah, I like that. I haven't said cuppa ever in my life, and I think this is a good first usage of it.
I also don't. I've only heard it, and I've never said it, and now that I said it, I wish I didn't say it.
No, because actually, I just realized it's because you're the one who got me into Wentworth.
Ah, yes, that's where I got it from. Yeah. That's where I first heard it from.
Yep, Wentworth. That's official plug number 2. Wentworth is a pretty good show.
Have you watched it all?
Oh yeah, I watched it all. I loved the ending. I thought it was a perfect ending. Aside from, well, I'm not even going to say aside from, because I don't want to spoil it to our millions of listeners.
Yeah, no, it was really good, and the new season is out on Australian TV now, but we can't watch it because we're not in Australia. We're not in Australia.
That's true. We should talk to Teo. Just get him to like hold up his phone to the speaker and like let us know how the whole new season goes. Shout out to Teo. What a guy.
What a guy indeed.
Yeah, he's wonderful. He's our first... No, we already shouted out my sister. He's our second official shout out. Teo's a wonderful person. Teo Pels. Yeah. Okay, back to business. Sorry, we've gone on all kinds of tangents.
I've been recording for 2 hours and 14 minutes.
Yeah, but like the official podcast didn't start until I started recording 1 hour and 8 minutes ago. So this is totally a very approachable episode. That'll be short and easy introduction.
Definitely
clearly.
Easy editing too. I can't wait.
Yeah, good for you, man. It's not like you have a 12-hour workday, right?
No, not at all.
Honestly, if you want to send it to me, I can try doing the editing. Because I'm the one hearing it from the lagged perspective, so it might be easier for me to edit too.
Yeah, we can put it on a Google Drive and we can both. Well, yeah. We don't want 2 editors on it, but yeah.
We'll just have a competition.
Who can edit better?
And say like, this one is slightly better. We'll bring in a third party for unbiased judging. Bible story.
Gouda, Bible story. We're looking at today 2 Kings, not the 3 Kings. We're looking at 2 Kings, chapter 2, verses 23 and 24. John, do you know what this is before I even talk about it?
Hell no. I am not one of those people who knows the Bible.
Well, don't look it up.
2 Kings chapter... Oh, no, okay, I'm not pulling it up.
Don't look it up. Yeah, don't look it up. Let me tell you the story first. We're looking at 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 23 and 24. This is a story about our boy named
that's going to be about David, right? Nope, I didn't say that.
Don't look it up. Are you looking it up?
No, I just said David. Obviously, I'm wrong.
Oh, well, I see you looking down at your phone, so...
Yeah, I'm pulling it up, but I'm not reading it yet.
Okay. Yes, this is a story about our boy named Elisha. That's Elisha with an SH, not a J. Elisha was a dude in the Bible. John, can you give us some background on Elisha? Do you know anything about him?
He's a prophet. He's one of the major prophets.
Major prophet. You heard it here first.
If you've never heard it before.
And Elisha was good old friends with our the main boy here named God. And one time,
the main gender-neutral God named God.
The main gender-neutral God, wwho we spell H-E with the capital H.
I have my qualms about that, but continue.
Let's re-edit the entire Bible so that he has Zim and Zer pronouns. How about that?
I'm not gonna concede to that either. I'm super picky, so we'll discuss that at a later moment.
In 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 23 and 24, it says, Elisha, he went up there to Bethel, and while he was going up on the way, some small boys came out of the city and jeered at him, saying, "Go up, you bald head! Go up, you bald head!" These little boys, this is part of the Bible, this is me now. These little boys were making fun of poor Elisha for being bald, And I'd just like to say right now, we hold no grudges on this podcast against any bald people at all. In fact, I think some of the most intelligent people in the world are and have been bald. And I think it's because they're not bogged down by hair, and they can let their brain flow freely through their crown chakra. That is my belief on bald people. What is yours? Leave it in the comments below. Anyway, so these kids are making fun of Elisha as he's going up to Bethel, calling him a bald head. Elijah then, verse 24, turns around, and when he saw them, he cursed them in the name of the Lord, and sent 2 she-bears out of the woods, and tore the boys into 42 pieces. The end. So I'd like to know, it's obviously sort of one of those what the hell Bible moments. So I'd like to start not by saying, why did Elisha do this? Because it's obvious. These kids were making fun of him for being bald. And if I were bald, I would send 2 she-bears after the boys too. So I'd just like to ask you, John, why is this included in the holy word of God, the main boy Bible? Why is this part important to the rest of not only Kings, but the whole Bibbidi Bible?
Okay, so first of all, I just want to say I really appreciate they're starting out with a softball, like really making it an easy answer. Because clearly this is one of those very straightforward situations where we talk about every Sunday. This is a situation
that all Christians agree on.
Yeah, exactly. No, okay, well, first of all, hell if we know, am I right? But I'm going to just jump into it and say some that my immediate reactions would be. And that is that it's one of those situations where we look at someone who's ordained by God, someone who is, in the tradition that's represented here. We're looking at someone who's been selected to speak the word of God and to represent God to people. We're looking at a prophet who's a big deal. And we have him being like a very temperamental little here. He's acting just childish, but childish with a lot of like weird power too. You know what? Honestly, let's make this topical. He's acting like Donald Trump. If Donald Trump had the power to summon she-bears, we would all be because
why? There would be a lot more she-bears going after a lot more brown people. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah. Oh man, we've got someone who has been selected by God to do something spectacular, ideally. And honestly, I'm not so familiar with Elisha's story that I know exactly what he does later or earlier. I don't know, but I know he's a major prophet, and at the same time, he's someone who just does something incredibly horrible and childish. I don't know. Calling it childish feels like diminishing the full weight of what he did. What you said, 42 youths? That's how many people he mauled, or the she-bears mauled on his proclamation.
Not 42 people. He tore these boys. I think there's only it just says some small boys. So I imagine a group of 5 to 6, and he had these she-bears tear these 5 or 6 small boys into 42 pieces.
Oh, 42 pieces. So right. Then you bring math into it.
I'm imagining every finger severed, most toes, all extremities, noses, elbows are probably in a separate place than their arms. This is the kind of thing that I'm imagining. I'm separating this human body into 42 pieces in my head here.
I'm interested in that your vision of this still protects the vitals. You know, like they got all their toes and their extremities all messed up, but like theoretically they're still alive. They got all their organs functioning. They're doing okay. There's just a lot of little pieces of their fingers lying around.
I adhere to Hammurabi's code, which is, it's an eye for an eye, a bald comment for a sheep.
So, you're the equivalent for making fun of someone's baldness is just tearing apart their fingers.
Not only their fingers, but their toes and their noses and their elbows.
Right. Okay, so they're okay. Well, no, they're not okay. They're probably gonna bleed out, but There's not a lot of hospital stuff going on at that time. Sad stuff.
And so it's pretty clear that nobody knows why this was included in the Bible. Why do you think that the Lord allowed Elisha to command these two she-bears to devour the boys?
Man, don't ask me that.
Yeah, I shouldn't ask you that.
Yeah,
I mean, I should ask you that, but then I shouldn't expect you to have an answer.
Right, thank you. So everyone who's listening to this...
This is sort of a cultural question you may or may not know the answer to. I guess being bald during this time was something to frown upon. Is that why? Should Elisha have been ashamed that he's bald? Are the children, are the boys, are they right in making fun of his baldness?
Objectively, from my perspective, no. I don't know how I could just say objectively from my perspective. That's an oxymoron.
Culturally, at the time, was it bad to be bald?
I have never heard anything that would indicate that like bald people were any more frowned upon at that age than they are now. Like obviously there are people making fun of him, so obviously there's some stigma about it.
Oh, not just people; they were boys.
The boys. Yeah, let's not forget that. Yeah, no, obviously there's some stigma about it, but I don't think there's any like real profound shame that was like a big part of it. I think it's just a bunch of little boys being boys.
Boys will be boys.
Yeah, ain't that the worst possible reaction to have to bad behavior, right? But yeah, going back to the first question a little bit though, I want to say, on the most pragmatic level, I think this story is included because it was part of a collection of stories, or like the bigger collection. They were like, yeah, this is part of the canon. This is important to our tradition. And that more than likely at the Council of Carthage, where they decided all of this stuff, they kind of were just like, let's not talk about this one part, because it's just part of a bigger thing that we like. That's my understanding of it. But if I'm really trying to derive meaning from it and say like, this is what it has to say to us, and I don't even want to defend this because it's a horrible story about a person doing horrible things.
It wasn't that bad. The boys deserved it.
Right. They were being a little bit rude. Yeah, but I think it's a story about someone who got ordained for great things being imperfect. And I think there's a lot of, specifically looking at this through a modern perspective, there's a lot of church tradition where we look at stories of like Old Testament heroes and patriarchs and we're like, well, they were so extraordinary. Like David was such a good guy. Like, no, David committed adultery and raped a woman named Bathsheba. Let's not say David was perfect.
One might even say David was a naughty boy.
He was a naughty boy. And here we've got Elisha being a naughty boy.
There's a lot of naughty boys in the Bible is what we're finding out.
Exactly. That's the moral of the story. And I think there's a degree where it's like, you know, obviously this isn't something we can condone. Let's not summon she-bears. If you're someone who has the potential to summon she-bears, do not summon she-bears to separate a group of boys into 42 bits.
Guys, can we just stop with all the she-bears? That if you take away one thing from listening to this podcast, in your car, or in your place of work, or as you're falling to sleep at night listening to our soft voices, then I have one thing to say to you, and it's quit it with all the she-bears.
Yes, exactly. That's moral number one. I think that's the big thing we can all agree on here. Don't summon she-bears. Don't maul boys. Or girls. Don't maul anybody. Don't maul anybody. Period. But also, I hate saying this. I hate being like, yeah, but God used this guy, and even though he messed up, God used him for great things. Because, like, then it's like, let's ignore the fact that he messed up. And obviously, I don't want to do that. I don't want to say, like, yeah, he killed some kids, but, like, he was a prophet. He did some good stuff, too. Like, let's, like, I think the moral of this isn't just that. And really, I'm really stretching here. Like, I bet there's someone who's way more educated than I am listening to this. If anybody's listening to this, there's gonna be someone more educated than I am listening to this, and they're gonna be like, no, 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 please. They're gonna be wishing they were present on the recording to like correct me on this. But I'm gonna say,
come on our show as a guest and tell us which extremities best remove when somebody calls you bald.
Right. We're trying to be very pragmatic about this, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's a story of like the fact that we are human and we do mess up, and it's a very extreme example of that. But there's even though Elisha was like did this horrible thing, he went on to bear the image of God as he had done since his birth, and God used him for good.
I have a question about Elisha.
Yes.
Was
Let
he
me not
was
be
he,
able to answer that right away.
Was he a Jew boy?
Oh yeah, I can answer that one. Yes, he was a Jew.
But my question here, the reason I asked if he was a little Jewish boy was because this thought just occurred to me actually. Maybe the reason that the boys were making fun of him was because he was bald, and I think in Jewish, at least super old Jewish culture and society, aren't you supposed to grow your hair out and never cut it? And so then, therefore, being bald would be embarrassing, or like a sign that maybe you weren't a sign that you weren't very holy or something.
That's probably a thing. This is one of those moments that I feel like we'll encounter frequently in the podcast, where I'm like, "Oh, Chris, I wish you had mentioned these points ahead of time so I could do my research and be like, yes or no."
Well, see, so I know for a fact that some sects of Judaism are like that. Sects as sects.
Right.
Some sects of Judaism are like that. I don't know if Elisha was that specific sect of Judaism where it's not cool to cut your hair.
Right. Yeah, no, and there is some Levitican law that definitely discusses that. But in my utter fallibility as a biblical scholar, I have not done any sort of comprehensive research on Levitican law because I think that's boring. There's some mention of like how you should grow your hair and all that kind of stuff, but I don't know the rules, man. So, but yeah, I could see where you're coming from with that. And again, this is one of those moments where if anyone is listening to this podcast, there's gonna be someone saying like, no, you're getting it wrong. Like here's what the Levitican law says. Here's how it applies to Elisha. Ugh. And so like, yeah, again, mention it in the comments below. Where are the comments gonna be? Are the comments gonna be below?
There may not be any comments. There may not be any comments section.
Yeah, that's more than likely.
And people might spend time trying to look for a comment section that never existed.
Yeah, don't look below. It might not be there. But you have my Twitter handle, as ridiculous as it may be.
You can just tweet Jonathan at FunkmasterJFree, isn't that it?
Yeah, FunkmasterJFree, because
FunkmasterJFree.
Obviously.
And you can ask him or tell him what do you think about these peeps.
Yeah, more than likely tell me, because hell if we know, right? I'm going to try to say that as many times as I can. Because part of it is like, yeah, I literally don't know what I'm talking about. Part of it is like, haha, we're saying the title, isn't that cool? So hell if we know, please inform us. If you're a smart person, please tell us, so that afterwards, in the next episode, when we get at replies, we'll be like, oh, and here's what we said that was wrong in the last episode, right?
Right. Oh, yeah, that's good. Yeah, we'll correct our mistakes in future episodes and yep.
Perfect. That exactly.
So yeah, that was the Bible story that I wanted to share because I came across it recently and I was just like, well, that's one I've never heard before, and I can't find any place for in anything other than just like a nice little short story about how great it is to be a powerful bald boy.
Yeah, powerful bald boy. That's
powerful bald boy. You
character.
can tweet at the podcast at powerful bald boy.
Oh, let's secure that. Let's secure that Squarespace. Powerfulbaldboy.com.
Squarespace.com/powerfulbaldboy.
I don't think that's how Squarespace works, but okay.
You're probably right. We should also secure that before we get sponsors.
Every single website that is purchased through Squarespace is squarespace.com/
Right.
I think they would not get a lot of business if that were the case.
Right. I think that would deter people from getting a Squarespace website. They might even go to a competitor, and I can say this because we're not spawned. They might even go to a competitor such as GoDaddy, which is something that a woman said to me one time during intimate relations, and I didn't know how to respond. She said, GoDaddy.com. Something else? Let's enter our new segment here called Things That Women Have Said to Me During Intimate Relations that also happen to be URLs. One woman...
That's such a specific segment. And you're gonna have to just take it away here, man. I don't have anything. I'm eager to listen to this though.
I'm just gonna just list the tabs that are open on my computer right now.
Right.
One woman, I had just come home after a long, hard day, and this woman said to me as we were kissing, she said, "Chris, SoundCloud.com/the-funky-cat/sets/tfc4-gec-o."
Rolls off the tongue in the moment.
And I knew it right there.
You don't even realize you're saying. And then it just
I knew it right there that she was the boy for me. Here's the situation here. John,
Yeah.
should I address? I just called you John again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's like the fourth time. I think you've exclusively called me John, actually, through this podcast.
Maybe we're adopting different personalities. Maybe you're John here on the podcast, but you're Jonathan other places. Just like you're Funkmaster J Free on Twitter,
Exactly.
and just like I'm at Powerful Bald Boy on Twitter.
Have you actually claimed that yet? Because as soon as we drop this episode, that's gonna be taken up like fire.
Right, somebody's gonna scoop it up right there and make millions of dollars. No, and I actually do need to change my Twitter handle because it's creative. But okay, here's the thing: my Twitter handle is @_Dr. Whom, which is funny because I'm a grammar nerd. But it's also I feel a little bit of a poser. I feel like a little bit of a poser sometimes because I am not a Doctor Who fan. I've seen a couple episodes and I think it's a silly show. And so the fact that my Twitter handle is @_Doctor.
Who's going to listen to us is a Doctor Who fan.
I know. That's one of those things where I just don't like it.
I get that, yeah.
But so I feel like @Doctor Whom should be saved for somebody who is both a grammar fanatic and a Doctor Who fan, and I am only half of those things. I also don't like the fact that my Twitter handle begins with an underscore. Because I think that's difficult for people to find on their keyboard. I don't know right off the top of my head where my underscore is, but looking at my keyboard now, I can see it's to the right of the 0, and I think you have to press the Shift key to get it. So, this enters us into our next segment called Where Things Are on My Keyboard. Starting at the top left, we have the escape button,
and I want to
followed by the small brightness button, followed by the large brightness button.
I'm gonna use all the powers within me to make this not a segment that we do.
We'll pick it up again next week.
When I've tried to
we'll pick it up again next week. Just help me remember. We left off with a large brightness button. We'll pick it up next week at the 2, which if you press the Shift key on becomes the @ sign. Which you can follow me on Twitter by typing in @_Dr. Whom.
What a lovely, lovely transition, rolling it all back into one thing.
Just like a little sushi.
Yeah. I will say, it has been difficult. Sometimes I'll tag you on something that I think is hilarious on Instagram, and it'll be like, Dr. Whom, that's someone else, and then I have to put the underscore, and it's a hassle. So
right,
totally
and I think my IG and my Twitter accounts are the same handle, and I am not convinced that either of them is the way to go. I'm looking now; I can see it is true. @_Dr. Whom is both of me.
Yep. So okay. So I feel like we're at the end of the episode.
I feel like
we're at the end of the episode. So we've plugged our Twitter accounts for some reason. Hopefully
don't follow us on Twitter.
It's really pointless. You heard it here first. Some of the tweets that I have. If you enjoyed that, that's awesome. Good for you. Go for it.
But you're in a minority.
No pressure. I'm not. Yeah, you're not in the minority there. Don't worry about it.
Well, John, let's wrap it up by entering our very last segment, which is name the first 3 things that you see on your desk.
I'm gonna show this to you. The listeners at home won't be able to witness it, but here's my desk.
Okay.
It's literally got exactly 3 things on it. My laptop isn't one of those things. My laptop is sitting on my bed right now next to my desk because #simple living. Am I right? Any young adult volunteers listening to this? Simple living, man.
Simple living or poor boy from a moderately wealthy family.
Yeah.
Send the bolts of lightning, very, very frightening.
That's pretty appropriate. So I will name all 3 things that are on my desk right now. One of them is my blue snowball microphone, through which you are hearing everything that I'm saying, with pop filter and all. Another one of them, excuse me for this, you might hear a little thud as I pull it out from underneath the blue snowball microphone, is this hand-in-hand folder, which is the Center for Jewish Arab Education in Israel, which was part of a thing that I went to called Roots, where they discussed Israel-Palestine relations through interfaith cooperation, which is a big part of something that I'm into and a big part of what I'm doing here in Indianapolis right now. Not specifically with like Israel-Palestine intervention. Yeah, what's up?
Let me interrupt you real quick about the Jewish-Palestine relationships.
Let's really address that.
Let's just talk about the Jewish and Palestine relationships real quick. Did you know that Donald Trump's who is it? It's his daughter's husband is going to solve Jewish-Palestine relations. He is tasked with that.
Yeah. No, he's tasked with a lot of things.
What's his name again? I forget his name.
I forget his first name, but it's Kushner, right?
That's right. Yeah,
like Jared.
Kush.
Is it Jared? Jared Kushner?
Jared, that's right. He went to Jared.
Cool. Yeah. Right. He went to Jared because he could do no other.
Because every kiss begins with Jared, I think is their motto,
yeah.
Isn't it?
It's a conglomeration of jewelry stores.
Well, John, what's the last thing on your desk?
Last thing on my desk is this weird peach-colored banner.
Well, with that, I think we can end the recording here. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.
Hopefully.
Bye!
Bye!